Welcome to the American Research Institute of the South Caucasus panel, Accessing Materials in Libraries and Archives in the Time of COVID-19. I'm Tolleen Lindsay, Executive Director of ARISC, and we're delighted to have you all here today. ARISC encourages and supports scholarly study of the South Caucasus states, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia across all disciplines of the humanities, sciences, and social sciences. While there are many ways that different disciplines conduct research, library research is common to them all. The global pandemic has resulted not only in researchers being able to travel internationally to libraries and archives, but as university and institute libraries and archives in the South Caucasus, US, UK, and many other countries remain closed to the public, many of us cannot physically access materials in our own cities. As the countdown to the fall semester has begun in earnest, we are joined today by stalwart scholars and librarians who are going to share on their libraries' South Caucasus collections, how to access resources at their libraries and around the world with a focus on digital access. Today's panel follows on ARISC's roundtable last week, Research in the South Caucasus in the Time of COVID-19 and Beyond, where we discuss different challenges and opportunities for doing research in the time of COVID. We are thinking of ways that ARISC can support research on the South Caucasus this coming year under these conditions. If you have other ideas on how we can provide support or create more virtual spaces for connecting scholars, please reach out to us at info@arisc.org. We feel now, perhaps more than ever, it is critical to create spaces where researchers working on the South Caucasus can connect, support each other, and share ideas. We do not have up-to-the-minute updates for you on the COVID-19 situation in the South Caucasus, as our resident directors are currently on vacation, but they have been updating the website regularly this summer with the latest information, so do check out the website for updates. We would like to take a moment here to remember two lives that have been lost to the COVID-19 and affect our community, Gregory Areshian and Faik Chelebi. Gregory Areshian was an archaeologist and historian, most recently a professor at the American University of Armenia. He was the co-editor of the international team of archaeologists who found the 5,500-year-old shoe in 2008 and the oldest winery in Armenia. Faik Chelebi was a well-known Azerbaijani tar performer and ethnomusicologist. He was an expert on Azerbaijani mugham. He passed away last week from COVID-19 in St. Petersburg, Russia. They will both be missed. I now have the pleasure to introduce our panelists. Dr. Kit Condill is a Russian East European and Eurasian Studies librarian and an assistant professor at the Library of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He's a 2004 graduate of UIUC's School of Information Sciences, where he teaches a Reese Bibliography course each spring, a 1995 graduate of Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota, and a 1992 participant in the University of Michigan's Armenian Language Summer Institute in Yerevan. He spent 7 years as a Central Asian Reference Specialist and then the manager of the federal funded Slavic Reference Service. In 2017, he was named a Ralph T. Fisher Library Scholar. His research interests revolve around the publication history and national bibliography of marginalized groups in the former Russian Empire and Soviet Union, particularly in the North Caucasus. Dr. Michael Erdman is the curator of Turkish and Turkic collections at the British Library. He was awarded the title of PhD by SOAS University of London in 2018 for his dissertation on the comparative historiography of origin narratives in early Republican Turkey and the Soviet Union. His latest work is an exploration of shifting ideologies of Bekir Kobanzadze's writing on linguistics. Dr. Liladhar Pendse is a librarian for Slavic, East European, and Eurasian Studies collections, the Caribbean, and Latin American Studies collection at the University of California, Berkeley. He has worked at Princeton University and the University of California, Los Angeles as a professional collection development librarian in the field of East European and Caucasus and Central Asian studies. He earned his doctorate at UCLA in 2013. His research interests revolve around the formation of national identities in the Caucasus and Central Asia and early print books of Latin America. Each panelist will now have a few minutes to discuss South Caucasus resources available to scholars during the pandemic. We will begin with Kit Condill.
All right. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? It's good to be here today. I see some familiar faces out there, so it's good to be with you. I have 15 slides and 12 minutes, so this is going to be real fast, but there will be time for questions at the end, and as Tallinn said, the recording will be available afterwards. Before I begin, I guess to go ahead and stress the main point of what I'm about to say, in terms of access to materials, I think the situation is a little better than it might seem. Hopefully, you will be, if you continue to work with your librarians or with something like the Slavic Reference Service here in Illinois, I hope you'll be pleasantly surprised at what you're actually able to get access to, either online or even physically in some cases. Apart from that, the ability to do bibliographic work under the current circumstances is very expansive. There's tons of work you can do in terms of identifying materials that you want to see, which is an important part of the research process. You may not be able to see them all right now. Actually, that's always true. You get a wonderful bibliography on some topic and you find all these wonderful articles and book chapters and dissertations that you want to see, and you can't always get your hands on them all right away. Sometimes it takes years and travel to actually get access to them. So that's not that different, and I would encourage everyone to take advantage of this opportunity to focus on that bibliographic work, literature review, finding sources on your topic. So let me attempt to share my screen here. I don't know that I'm able to do that, actually. I think I'm here as a attendee, so I can't share my screen.
I just made you a co-host, Kit.
All right, thank you. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my presentation now. So I'm going to focus on Georgian studies today. Let's dive right into it. We'll start with some things that are hopefully familiar to you if you do Georgian studies, then maybe a few things that are not as familiar. Then at the end, I'll quickly go over some of the resources we have at the University of Illinois for the South Caucasus in general. So I'd like to begin with probably the best free online resource for Georgian studies, which is the Georgian National Bibliography, available through the Georgian National Library. So we're looking at this list here of most of the national bibliographic sources that are available through the National Library. It's truly amazing. I hope you've looked at this before. The numbers here in the right-hand column are just amazing. So there are over 2 million records in all of these periodical bibliographies on the right-hand side. So those are individual articles in journals and newspapers where you can search and see a description, title, author, subject, so forth for individual articles. They don't lead directly to the full text, and we'll get to that in a minute. And full text is certainly not available in every case, but this is an excellent way to dive into the whole history of Georgian publishing, and not just Georgian language publishing, but publishing in Georgia in any language. There's a lot of Russian material in here, some Abkhaz, and so forth. So it's kind of broken up into various pieces, but we don't really have time to familiarize ourselves with that right now. These are some sample entries from the Ahmats journals Chronicle, which covers these years here, 1832 to 925, and also 1939 to 2006. So this is what the individual records look like. These are, journal articles. You can really get a pretty good sense of what the articles are about and whether you want to try to track down the full text. There's even annotations here describing what the article is about. So again, can't linger too long on any of these things. So if you're interested in learning more about Georgian National Bibliography, the University of Illinois Slavic Reference Service has created some guides to Georgian National Bibliography and Georgian periodicals. The links are here. I encourage you to take a look at those. It kind of gives you an overview and explains what different sources can do for you, and a lot of them are available online. Setting that aside for a moment and moving on to the question of, okay, I've identified something I want to see, how can I see it? Digital libraries, of course, are the main thing at the moment. There's a wonderful digital library available at the National Library of Georgia. Again, this is the Iverieli Digital Library. The link is there. And here's a short list of some of the journals, I believe, that are available through this digital library, including the very first Georgian newspaper published in St. Petersburg in 1819. That's the image we're looking at here. So full text of many, many journals and other materials available here, thousands and thousands of documents. So hopefully your topic in Georgian studies is something that is reflected in this digital library, and you can spend many happy hours looking at materials from the comfort of your own home. There are other digital libraries that can be useful. This Mamardashvili digital library is also through the Georgian National Library. I'm not as familiar with it, but there is quite a bit of material in here as well. There's a periodica section of this digital library, which is full text of articles from more recent Georgian publications, Georgian journals. There's the link is right there. I certainly recommend looking at that. It's a good way to review some of the Georgian scholarship since about the year 2000. You can click through all the way to the full text of articles. It's a little bit confusing, but you can get there. If you have any trouble with it, get in touch and we can help walk you through that. Another one, that is maybe not at the top of everyone's mind is the Hattie Trust Digital Library, which is a huge digital library that most of the major libraries of North America and Western Europe are part of. You can actually search for Georgian text in here. Let me take a moment to try to show you that. Switch over here. So, sorry. So here we are in Hattie Trust. I have Sakart Velo pasted in here, the Georgian word for Georgia. And I'm going to search the full text of everything in Hattie Trust, which includes millions and millions of books and journals and newspapers. So you get almost 2,000 results, which is not a huge amount, but might be better than nothing. Now, the problem with Hattie Trust is that most of the material in it is still copyrighted. You can see here that these are books from the 1990s. Those are still copyrighted. Under normal circumstances, you cannot look at them. If your institution is a member of Hattie Trust, then you might be able to. It depends. It's a little bit complicated. we might be able to access some older material here. Let's see if this actually works. So I'm looking at things from the early 20th century now. Yeah, so older material you should be able to see, and for newer material you might be able to see it under the current circumstances. So you can go right into the full text here. So that's something that might be worthwhile. You can also search in Russian in this digital library. So let me go back to my presentation quickly. Yes, okay. All right, archival work. You can even do some work preparing to visit archives. Some archives will digitize materials for you. It kind of depends. So there are archival guides online where you can get an idea of which materials you might want to look at, which collections you might want to look at. Down at the bottom here, these are basically articles about the Abkhaz National Archives and what they're trying to do there. One thing that I feel like scholars overlook a lot of times are just open web resources from the region. There are some interesting projects from Georgia with the images there. And well, I'm almost out of time. Okay, so on the here at the bottom are a few Abkhaz websites that include a huge amount of full text material, 100-year-old material sometimes, and a lot of material relating to Abkhaz identity, how Abkhaz people see themselves. Same thing for Ossetian identity on the right over here. So these are resources where you can sort of, see what people in the region are saying about themselves. Now, these are things that may also be less familiar. Through these links here, you can see basically all of the Georgian language materials held at the Russian National Library in St. Petersburg, which is a pretty significant collection. It's a virtual card catalog, a scanned copy of their card catalog, so you can virtually flip through all the catalog cards and see what they have. And see, it's not just about seeing what they have, but also familiarizing yourself with what exists. That's a very useful thing, especially from an American perspective, for example. Another thing, let's see, I'm really running out of time, but I do want to show you this. Maybe this will be the last thing. The Russian State Historical Library's subject catalog, you can do a really cool thing here. This again is a scanned card catalog. I'm just going to put Gruz in here, Gruzia, the Russian word for Georgia. And you get all these results down here, maybe hundreds of results. So you can click on any of these. And here's Nestor Lakoba, for example. And there are 6 cards in the catalog for him. A lot of times these are obscure publications that you would never know existed otherwise. Book chapters. This is a 5-page article in Vaprosy Historic KPSS. It's pretty amazing. I don't really have time to explain it fully, but if you can read Russian, this is certainly worth looking at. Let me go back to my presentation real quickly and wrap this up. There are also subscription databases that if your institution subscribes to them, they can be very helpful. We have wonderful collections here at the University of Illinois. We don't really have time to go over that now. many serial holdings, long runs of serials from Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Armenia, including Armenian publications from the Ottoman Empire in the lower right, many reference works. Now, as far as how you can get access to these things, you can request duplication up to 15 pages from any print source that we have that is not available online. We will duplicate those 15 pages for you, so you could request the table of contents, for example, and then identify an article or a book chapter that you want and do another request for that. Our interlibrary loan department is working. So if your interlibrary loan department is also functioning, you can place an interlibrary loan request and we will send you a physical item. And we are also developing the capability to scan entire works when necessary. If there's no online version available, we are ramping up to be able to scan an entire book and send you a PDF copy of that. So hopefully we will be able to do that soon. And here's my contact information and the Slavic Reference Services contact information. So please, if you have any questions, keep in touch. We would be happy to help provide access to our collections or any collections that are freely available elsewhere. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kit. That was so much useful information. And just a reminder to everyone that we'll have time for questions after the presentations are done. So next up, we have Michael Erdman.
Thank you. So it's a pleasure to present today to meet everyone, at least virtually. My name is Michael Erdman, and I'm responsible for the Turkish and Turkic collections at the British Library. So today what I'm going to go through, as we'll see on the next slide. So the next slide, please. And so what I'm going to do today is go through some of the materials that we have at the British Library and how you can access them, both manuscripts and printed materials, as relates to the entirety of the Caucasus. And then I'll go on afterwards to some of the additional sites that we have where you might be able to find piecemeal works, and then follow up with works for Azerbaijan and Turkey, Turkey more related to the study of the Caucasus rather than the study of Turkey. So on the next slide, you'll see the catalog. So the catalog of all manuscripts and archives held at the British Library. This is the archive and manuscript catalog, essentially, and you can go there and search according to either the call number, the reference for the manuscript, or according to some sort of keyword. So what I've done is I've searched through it for something by Nizami, so disputed Persian language poet born in what is contemporary Azerbaijan. And most of the manuscripts that you'll find, most of the material that you'll get through this catalog will just be metadata. So you'll only be able to find information about the manuscripts that we hold. Occasionally, you'll be able to find a link to a digitized manuscript through this catalog, and you'll be lucky enough to get a screen that looks like the one in the bottom right-hand corner. So this is what we call the universal viewer, and these are manuscripts, very few of the manuscripts that we hold for the Asian and African studies collections, which can be downloaded and used on your computer offline. So there are a few of these that are gradually being converted to UV, to downloadable manuscripts. For the most part, all that you'll find through this, this particular catalog is metadata. In order to find actual digitized manuscripts, we go onto the next page and we see the digitized manuscripts catalog for the British Library. This is a repository of all of the manuscripts that we have that are uploaded to a separate viewer system, and both Western and non-Western languages, so European and non-European languages. And these are works that have been completely digitized cover to cover. In order to find a particular work, you can either search by keyword or by the manuscript number. If you know the actual manuscript number of the item held at the British Library, search for it only in the manuscript section there. Otherwise, you won't find it through keywords. I've again searched for Nizami, and I've come up with his Khamsa. So on the right-hand side of the page, you'll see what you'll get if you go click through to a particular holding. And there, once again, you'll get metadata. So you'll be able to understand a bit more about what the manuscripts are that we hold at the British Library, where they're from, who they were copied by, if we have that information, the contents of them, and possibly the provenance. And then at the bottom, you'll find access to see those actual images. It'll take you to another site. You can't download those images. You can screenshot them. And that's what I've done in the bottom left-hand corner, which is the Lives of the Fathers of Georgian manuscript. And so you can see the quality for reading these manuscripts online is quite good. Unfortunately, there are very few of our manuscripts in the Asian and African Studies section, and even fewer from the Caucasian region that have actually been digitized and placed online. This is primarily material that will be related to Armenia or Armenian diasporic creations. Occasionally you find some things in Georgian, and unfortunately nothing in Azerbaijani, and very few things in Ottoman Turkish. What you can do, however, to find a bit more material, and particularly printed material, is when we go to the next slide, you can go on to our separate catalog system, which is known as Explore. So on the next slide, you see a screenshot of the main page for Explore, where you can enter in a word. So this will have millions of works. We have approximately 170 million works currently held at the British Library. Several tens of millions have then been catalogued, and those cataloged records placed in this system. And you'll be able to search by something here. So I've searched for Armenian, and this will bring up every monograph, periodical, any printed, any publication rather, that is related to the word Armenian. If you go on the left-hand toolbar and click on online, you get the middle slide, screenshot rather, which shows you all of the works with the word Armenian in their metadata, which are available online. Unfortunately, some of these works are only available online at the library's site. So because of copyright, we're not able to share them freely as open access materials, whereas others are in fact available from the comfort of your own living room or from wherever you might be working. And so that last shot on the right shows you a catalog of plants from Azerbaijan, which is actually housed on an outside site. So you will be able to find works that are open access, some hosted at the library, others hosted on other sites, and this will direct you through without the need for actually registering, or at any point you will never need to actually pay for these materials. And there are, of course, fewer materials available through this, but as Kit said, there's a lot of metadata, and that in and of itself can be quite useful in terms of finding out what exists and what you might want to be looking for, and once you're able to actually travel to the British Library or search with other libraries. So when we go to the next slide, we see that subsection of books that is definitely open access and available to everyone, and those are books that were digitized through the Google Books project. I've given a screenshot of the project collection guide from our main website, where you can see that over 500,000 works that are out of volume have actually been digitized. These will be discoverable through our website, through the Explore catalog, but you can also find them through Google Books, and that's the bottom right-hand corner. So some of these books are available completely in their entirety. I don't believe that they're downloadable, but you can actually use OCR functionality on them to find words within them. So I've searched for Lesgin, and I've come up with this Polish work, which has been completely digitized and which is available through Google Books as well as through the British Library's website. And it's a good sort of tool, and because of OCR, so many of the different works that are there can be discovered. You don't just have to discover them by title, but you can also discover by searching, for example, Azerbaijani, Baku, Ganja, and find these words within the text. And from our own collections, it's primarily Armenian material, often from the diaspora, which has been digitized, but you do occasionally find works from Baku, from Tbilisi, that because of their early date, pre-1895, have been included in the Google Books project. On the next slide, we see some of the peripheral sites that we have. So these are sites housed within the British Library's broader website, but they're separate projects, they're separate works that will have digitized content. The first that I'm showing is Discovering Sacred Texts, which is a project devoted to religious materials. And so this often has fragments of digitized works that are not downloadable, but they do have quite a bit of metadata, and they're good if you're looking to get a sense of something. So for example, here we have a Quran from Dagestan. You can see about 20 pages of the work, and you can get a sense of the calligraphy, of the illumination. You can get a sense of the text, and there are a few printed works as well, and at least get a sense of what you're looking at and be able to navigate yourself a bit more in terms of what you might want to request digital copies of. The next slide shows a larger project that we have, which is the Hebrew Manuscript Digitization project. And this is a project that's devoted to the digitization of all of our manuscripts in Hebrew and or related to Judaism or the Jewish people. There are a number of different works that are related to the Caucasus, particularly whether Hebrew works from Dagestan and Georgia or vernacular works in Hebrew script. These are completely available, completely free to use. Many of them are not downloadable, although a few will be on the universal viewer, and search functionality continues to improve. So they're not OCR'd. You won't be able to search in Hebrew for a particular word, but you will be able to search through the metadata for geographic locators and indicators, which should help bring up works related to the Caucasus. And the last of the peripheral sites, the next slide in the slideshow, is related to our Greek manuscripts. So approximately 1,000 manuscripts in ancient Greek, manuscripts on vellum or papyri have been digitized. They're obviously related to the Eastern Mediterranean and also West Asia, but of course they will relate to some of the ancient history of Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. And these again are completely available, completely freely available to anyone who wishes to use them. So the next two slides, the first one that comes up next is the social media presence of the British Library. And I've first started off with the blogs because the blogs provide, both the Asian and African Studies blog and the European Studies blog, provide a sort of a guide to new acquisitions and newly cataloged treasures from the library, and also a bit of analysis. So you'll get a bit more of a narrative about some of the items that are held in the library, how they relate to collections outside of the library, and how you might begin to find them. And on the Asian and African Studies blog in particular, there's a section with Persian manuscripts, and that's where you'll be able to find all of the manuscripts in Persian, including those related to the Caucasus, that have been digitized by the library and that are available either on Universal Viewer or on the Digitized Manuscripts page. And the next slide is about our Twitter presence. And so here I've given 3 different Twitter accounts, the Asian and African Studies, BL Asian and African, BL European Studies, and then my own Altai to Euchre. These function in some way like the blogs in that you'll find newly digitized or cataloged materials, but they're also quite good resources for anyone who's looking for fragments of works. Curators will often photograph things themselves, place snapshots of printed or manuscript material with explanations of what they are. And so you might be able to get quite a lot more photographic evidence of works, be able to use a few more things, and be able to be connected to certain individuals or to works that might be useful in your own research. All of these accounts are managed by curators at the library, and so you can go through and see the tweets that they've done, and then contact the accounts in order to get more information from the curators about their own particular areas of specialty, and to learn more about what sort of items might exist at the library that might be pertinent to your own field of research. So with this slide, we end sort of the British Library section of the presentation, and the next slide that we go on to will be about Azerbaijan, and we look at some of the resources that are available from Azerbaijan and about Azerbaijan for research from home, from outside of the library. So the first is the National Library of Azerbaijan, our sister institution. As Kit mentioned, the National Libraries have immense and great quality metadata. The National Library of Azerbaijan's catalog has quite a lot about many different works that you might be able to use. I've got 1 minute remaining, but I hopefully can pass fast. And they also have a small limited digitized content section. So not everything is digitized, but quite a lot of material in Azerbaijani is available, including theses and data sets, for those who want to be able to use classic texts, canonical texts, as well as some secondary literature. The next slide is the Manuscript Institution. So that's the Mohammed Fuzuli Manuscript Institution that has, once again, digitized manuscripts available online. But it also is great because it has translations of some of the manuscripts into contemporary Azerbaijani, if you can read it. And they have digitized books that are secondary literature from Azerbaijan about the intellectual history and cultural history of the country and the region. They have archives, and importantly, they have conference materials. So if you're looking for papers that others have presented or other secondary source material, they have quite a lot that relates to the intellectual history of Azerbaijan, to publishing and manuscript heritage that are freely available online. The next slide shows just one of the examples of the State University of Baku's faculties. This is the philology faculty. You can find as well through the State University in Baku quite a lot of different sources that will, or sites rather, from the faculties that will direct you to scholarly journals, to data sets, to conference presentations that have been digitized and made freely available to anyone to use. They're generally in Azerbaijani, Turkish, or Russian, but they can be searched through on the website, and they're quite easy to access. The site is fairly robust in terms of your ability to download as well. And the last slide from Azerbaijan, the last resource that I'm going to share, is something from ISU. So this is a private collection, and the copyright considerations of the holder of this site might not accord with those of your jurisdiction, but essentially the individual has uploaded digitized copies of many different books from the 70s, 80s, and 90s from Turkey and Azerbaijan related to the region and related to its history. And it's a great way to find materials that are lacking in European and American libraries, but that can be viewed but not downloaded through ISU. So the next slide, I'm going to go on very quickly to Turkey. Turkey obviously has quite a large source of Turkic studies programs. And so in the first slide that we'll see for Turkey, we have the Manuscript institution. This has a lot of metadata, a few digitized manuscripts relating to Eastern Ottoman Empire and the Caucasus, and once again, digitized ebooks. The next slide from that is the National Thesis Center. So this here, you can search either in Turkish or in English. Turkish is probably the better option, and find thousands, if not millions, of digitized master's and PhD theses. And so you can look through for every different subject that you might want. And there are quite a lot of universities that are devoted to the study, that have sections devoted to the study of the Caucasus and Turkic languages or philology or history. So it's a very good resource to find secondary source material, and occasionally photostated facsimiles of primary source material through theses published in Turkey. The next slide will give us the National Library of Turkey. Just quickly to mention here, there's not a lot of digitized content on this, but if you are looking at periodicals, particularly Ottoman periodicals up to 1928, they do have an excellent source of downloadable PDFs of Ottoman periodicals published both inside Turkey and the former lands of the Ottoman Empire. And the last slide that I have from Turkey is one devoted to scholarly articles again. So this is Dergi Park, which is sort of like Turkey's JSTOR. So it has very many open access articles and journals housed or domiciled within Turkey that are devoted to Caucasian studies, Turkic linguistics and philology, Turkic history, Turkic literature. Many of these are available freely on the site. A few you'll have to register for or pay for. And it also has a lot of scanned articles, so ones from the 80s and 90s that might be quite difficult to find at libraries around the world. And so the last slide with resources that I have is just a few different generic resources. So this is hazine.info, which is a repository of other digital repositories, a great one for North Africa and West Asia. And Menalib, which is hosted by a German Oriental institution, which has a lot of digitized content from the former Soviet Union, particularly from the 1920s. And finally, Translatio, housed at the University of Bonn, which has digitized copies of periodicals in Arabic, Persian, and Ottoman Turkish. So again, perhaps a bit peripheral and a bit early if you're looking at the 20th century, but they have full runs. And if you are looking at printed heritage or publication history, then it's a great resource to start from. So for my last slide, just a final bit of advice, which is when in doubt, Google it. Because there's a lot that's available on Google that's been digitized and placed on private websites or private hosting platforms. And you'd be surprised what you can find and that you wouldn't be able to find in libraries in Europe or North America or East Asia that someone's put up onto their own private website. I'm going to try to make a PDF of this presentation and place it on my Twitter and link it to Arisk's Twitter page. So if you'd like to access this and access the links within it, check within the next 24 hours on my Twitter profile, and hopefully it'll be up there. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Michael. So much great, wonderful, useful information, and great to see what the British Library has in the collections and what everyone's doing. So next we have Liladhar Pendse, and let me pull up the presentation. Apologies for that. So please go ahead, Liladhar.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Liladhar Pendse, and I'm the librarian for Slavic East European and Eurasian Studies at University of California, Berkeley. Thank you, Ben, Maureen, Tallinn, and colleagues at the Arisk for inviting me to present along with my colleagues, Kit Condill of the UIUC and Dr. Michael Erdman from the British Library. The COVID-19 pandemic has presented unprecedented challenges that seem to be ongoing and seem unsurmountable. But like any other challenge, we are presented with an opportunity to reevaluate our collections, services, and the way we make these materials available to the scholars. Sometimes, anecdotally, we hear a blanket statement like, oh, why are you worried about the books? Everything is in the computer. Is everything really in the computer is the question I ask. While these philosophical musings might seem like running off on the tangent, they raise important questions. How do we go about providing for information needs of the faculty, scholars, and our students who study complicated regions like Caucasus in light of the pandemic? While there is not a one simple answer to the complicated question I have posed above, we do have certain ways to bring forth the utility of digital resources that can be leveraged to meet some of the needs for information. In this presentation, I will first go over electronic resources that we have in open access format in the state of California. So previous two presentations had a global as well as local focus, but my presentations mostly will revolve on a local California-based resources on Armenian studies. In this presentation, I will use several generalizations because the time is limited. Secondly, I have used University of California as a unified system of 10 campuses. And I will also show you some of the resources on Armenian studies that we have in the state of California. Before we start, I wanted to give you some context. It remains a well-known fact that after the Armenian genocide, the immigration of Western Armenians to California increased. Along with the Iranian Revolution of 1979, the exodus of Parskahai, or Iranian Armenians to California, continued along with the Iranians who fled the new regime. This followed by the fall of the Soviet Union and ensuing instability in the region prompted Hayastansi, or the Armenians from Eastern Armenia, or current modern state of Armenia, to leave their homes and behind and come to the United States. I'm not particularly focusing on the issues and of the diaspora publications that Armenians have established in California. There have been several works that describe Armenian migrations and the process of establishment of diaspora. Works such as M. Karakasian's and Pogosian's Armenian Migration and Diaspora, A Way of Life, and K. Toloyan's Elites and the Institutions in Armenian Transnation, and Dr. Fitate's work, But Why Glendale, California? A History of Armenian Immigration to Southern California, just to name a few. Next slide, please. A quick note before I start the presentation that the images are used here for academic and educational purposes only, and the copyright of these individual images belong to the institutions that have produced them. So here I'm focusing on the Online Archive of California. It is a unified catalog of finding aids of primary sources of over 200 California-based archives, libraries, cultural institutions, special collections. And also they include items from the University of California campuses. Besides serving as an integrator for various finding aids, the OAC also provides access to over 250,000 digitized images. Search for collections with the keyword Armenian reveals 219 collections and 70 items that can be used to further research in Armenian studies. The screenshot here shows searches done only for UC Berkeley campus, and we see that we have 40 discrete collections. Among them, there are AGBU, part of AGBU archives, as well as Armenian women writers collections that might be of interest to some, and as well as almost 56 additional items. Stanford University Library's Hoover Institution also houses several important Armenian studies archives, including the bulk of William Saroyan's papers. So those are all discoverable as far as the finding aids are concerned through the OAC. Next slide, please. So here is another screenshot of the Online Archive of California. You see how the particular collections look. In certain cases, the collections have not yet been cataloged, because oftentimes we try to show to our colleagues that, oh, we have these beautiful manuscripts, they have been cataloged and you can access them. But most libraries in which I have worked have several hundreds or thousands worth of works which are in backlog. And in order to discover them, one can use OAC, and there is a special facet which you can click on to request. It's the cataloging of the materials that one can access. Next slide, please. All right, the case for hidden collections, right? At UC Berkeley in 1960, the library got a donation of a huge collection of Armenian print books. Some of them are from the Western Armenian regions, some in Western Armenian language, the others are in the Eastern Armenian languages. At that point, there was not a single curator who could really read Armenian. So the library decided to box them up and store them in an interlibrary, in an off-campus storage facility. And that meant that people have to, the users have to page the whole box in order to discover what is inside. I was talking to the faculty when I got to UC Berkeley from Princeton in 2012, and one of the priorities they raised was, Liladhar, why don't you deal with this problem? Why are we having just so-called boxes we have to page and we have to look at the books one by one? So, you know, at any library, we need to get harmonious collaboration from different branches. And one of the branches which I dealt with was a digital library, digitization component branch at UC Berkeley Library, and they were quite forthcoming. So instead of cataloging individual books, which could have been the best possible solution, I was given two options. One is to catalog the finding aid, which has, let me say, images of particular item, and those who read Armenian can usually access them and page the items accordingly, or to create an alternative library guide where I can put the title page and basic bibliographic information. So I went ahead and created a library guide, as well as the library mounted the digitized version of the finding aid in order to facilitate access to the materials. Next slide, please. The other important database is Calisphere. It is an open access database, and there are over 1,750,000 items accessible, and these items include images, include selectively digitized program broadcasts such as from the Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty in Armenian language. Also include images of daily lives of Armenians in California, a total of 956 items in 42 different collections. So one can feel free. These are open access. You can see how the life of diaspora involved in the areas such as Fresno, Glendale, Hollywood in Southern California, or even in the Bay Area and San Francisco. Next slide, please. So now I'm focusing on an important collection at the UCLA in Southern California, which is called the Menacian collection of Armenian material. The slide will tell you a brief history of how it was acquired and gives you a background about Dr. Karo Omen Menacian's Isfahan provenance, and he was a physician and he was a collector. One can note that Menacian collection, also a part of it, Quranic manuscripts are housed at the Brown University on the East Coast. But I will focus here on mostly on the Armenian materials, and I will briefly read an interesting piece of his biography that the source for that is Washington University in St. Louis's exhibition of book stamps. And it states that, Dr. Karo Menacian, 1897-1973, was an Armenian physician, manuscript and book collector, and amateur historian. Dr. Menacian was educated at the English College in Isfahan, Iran. He later went to Europe to study medicine at the universities of London, Edinburgh, and Lausanne. He returned to Iran to practice medicine, first in Ahvaz from 1923 to 1925, and then Tehran from 1925 to 1935. During his time in Tehran, it is known that Dr. Menacian also took part in espionage for the Soviets. He became the personal physician of Sheikh Khazal al-Kabi of Mohammerah, the semi-autonomous chieftain of many Arab tribes in the Khuzestan province in Iran. The Sheikh cooperated with British and signed the treaty to permit oil drilling in his territory in exchange for payments and protections during the early years of Anglo-Persian Oil Company. Dr. Menacian relayed the details of Sheikh's contacts with the British to the secret police of the USSR, OGPU, and became an essential source of intelligence for the Soviets. Now, why I'm providing this background? Because although he has been characterized in this particular exhibition catalog or exhibition website as a spying for the Soviets, at the same token, we should understand that he was an avid collector. And as a doctor, he had access to different manuscripts. And some of the patients have collected on his behalf or given him those manuscripts. And in 1967, when he retired, in 1968, the whole collection was sold to UCLA, and part of it was sold to Brown. Why I'm making the case? The collection was acquired in 1968. It took until 1990s for any particular library to digitize it. And kudos to UCLA Library, our sister campus, because I also worked for almost 11 years at UCLA, that they were able to successfully digitize these materials. Next slide, please. So I'm showing you that there are Arabic, Persian manuscripts and a huge collections of print books, which some of them have been digitized through the Google Books. Next slide, please. Once again, I'm bringing you back to the online archive of California, because if you search through it, it allows you to discover these items. In some cases, you see an icon of a gauze or a glass or of an eye, and that means that these items have been digitized and can be accessed by clicking on the links. So I'm just giving you an example of a digitized manuscript from 1648 on the second photograph on this slide. And you can do at your own pace searches through the online archive of California to discover the items. Next slide, please. Now, if you go to the UCLA's website, it has a special website called Menacian Collection of Armenian Material, and it is a part of collection number so and so, and UCLA Digital Library has mounted those. And one of the manuscript I will bring to your attention, it's Liladhar Gospels. And these are not new, because in 2011 there was in September, there was an exhibition in 2001, I misspoke, at Getty Institution, and a catalog came out which was done by Matthews and Taylor, and it's titled The Armenian Gospels of Liladhar, the Life of Christ, illuminated by several different scribes. So if you go to the next slide, you will see the details of Liladhar Gospels, and here's a screenshot, and you will be able to increase the resolution or make the image big, and you can discover different types of scripts that were used by, I think there were 4 different scribes who contributed, and it's an illuminated manuscript from a monastery that was, I believe, I know that it was destroyed, but the manuscript somehow survived. So like my colleagues have focused, it is interesting to see the journey of Armenian manuscripts, right, from the 14th century to the present time, and how different avatars or their iterations have made it possible for us to access them in today's time through digital resources, while the libraries have shuttered their doors or partial access to the physical collections. Next slide, please. Besides UC Berkeley and UCLA, UC Riverside has a wonderful resource called California Digital Newspapers, and one can do search within those newspapers, and keyword search for Armenian reveals you some kind of resources, and these are all full text digitized, so you'll be able to see different advertisements which are often overlooked by researchers. You'll be able to see marriage announcements, obituaries of the Armenians who have since passed, and also the major news dealing with the Armenian diaspora. Next slide, please. At Fresno State University, there are Armenian newspapers digitized. So I'm giving you just one example on the screen, which you can see. And you are free to do searches within them. These are also open access resources, mostly in English language. Okay, next slide. Now, my colleague Keith had mentioned Hattie Trust. I have found Hattie Trust's emergency temporary access service to be of great utility to our researchers. What do I mean by that? If you do the search for just Armenia, you can do search for Hayastan, or you can type in using Armenian script, which I have not shown here, but it's easy to do using several phonetic keyboards. And when you do the search for full text and Armenians, you get about full view about 972 items, but all items are 9,252. Now you will see why he's showing me, because the items are only partially viewable, but because of the Hattie Trust's emergency temporary access service, if a particular item is contained as its physical iteration or a physical copy in, let's say, UC Berkeley's collections, we can access it temporarily, provided it has been digitized by Hattie Trust. So in the times of COVID, Hattie Trust has recognized the need for information sometimes outweighs, but you need to authenticate using the login through UC Berkeley and access the resource. One cannot download it, but one can see one page at a time and at least get access to the information that is needed. Next slide, please. So another quick thing about Library of Congress's collection, mostly it has been digitized from the manuscripts, and it shows in 1949, Kenneth Clark arrived in Jerusalem to begin a project, that would microfilm manuscripts from the great libraries of the Middle East. And one of the big institution was Armenian Patriarchate. So he was able to digitize those, and those can be searched in the Library of Congress catalog. Next slide, please. Okay, so sorry, I have a typo here. It's Galika, not Galka. BNF and Armenian National Library. We know that digital archives of Armenian National Library were down for whatever reasons, and the news came up in the Mirror Spectator saying that they have been restored. And I found this particular resource, the Union Catalog of Armenian Newspapers and Periodicals, of great utility in my own research that dealt with the Armenian periodicals of Eastern Mediterranean. And I was able to search for them. Recently, I have been working on a project which deals with Armenian periodicals of Azerbaijan. So when I was in Azerbaijan and I went to the National Library and I asked, I would like to see some of those newspapers. And I was faced with certain question mark on the face. What are you talking about? So one alternate source of information for me was Armenian National Library's digitized catalog. Next slide, please. So here are some searches, and this is a website, TERT. Shabbat TERT means weekly, TERT newspaper, periodical, .nla.am, and you will be able to do the searches. It provides you bibliographic information, or a metadata as we call it, on where it was published, how it was published, and how it's accessible. If you click on the titles and if it has been digitized, it gives you the a grid of years and the issues that are available, and one can look at them. So the first, I'm glad to announce that I believe that first Armenian newspaper, Azdarar, was published in British India in Madras or Chennai, and that can be accessed, and also UCLA holds copies of it in their special collections. Next slide, please. The other significant collection is at the Armenian University of Armenia. They have digital library of Armenian literature, and you can see digitized books that can be read online. And next slide, please. Well, since we are at the limitation of time, I rushed through my presentation. I tend to speak faster, but I believe that this presentation will be available on our website. And if you have any questions, like my colleague, Dr. Erdman, has said, just Google it and you will be able to find me, and I'll be able to answer any other questions that you might have. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Liladhar, so much. So we are running a little behind, but 1 second. So quickly before we turn to our Q&A portion, David Razan, head of New York University's Institute for the Study of the Ancient World Library, or ISAW, will speak for a few minutes on a project that they're developing of digital library materials. And so let me see if I can pull everything up.
Hi, I apologize. I think I can't tell if you can see or hear me. I guess you can see me.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. For a minute there, I thought you were going to give me the promotion of a lifetime and make me the head of the entire institute. Been fantastic. So I briefly want to bring to the attention of this group, and I want to thank. My area is not South Caucasus studies, and so I found this a very useful presentation, and so I'd like to thank ARSIC for putting it on and giving us just 2 minutes to talk about this project that we have. And in a nutshell, because I know that time is short, what we have done is we've been building something called the Ancient World Digital Library at ISAW. ISAW is dedicated to ancient archaeology and history and philology across a broad swath of the ancient world, from basically Western Europe all the way across to northern China. And as part of this, we've been building different sort of digital libraries and collections under this umbrella of the Ancient World Digital Library. And since this is recorded, and you can see the URLs and you can follow them, I'd be happy to put into the chat box as soon as I'm done all the relevant URLs. But we have several different collections, and one of them that we've been developing with your colleague Karen Rubinson, who's a research associate at ISAW, is essentially a curated collection from the Georgian National Museum and the Institute for Ethnography in Armenia. And we have written agreements with both of these institutions to essentially serve. Actually, do you mind going to the About section of this? Maureen, I apologize. Perfect, thank you. Oh, sorry, if you could go to the, well, that's fine. So actually, do you mind going back to the other site, the one that is the sort of reddish one that you're on, and just clicking the About page right on the, oh, great, thank you. This describes everything I'm going to say, but essentially with these two organizations, and hopefully soon Azerbaijan, we have agreements to essentially publish all the archaeology and history that they publish that is in scope. So basically from the Neolithic up to about the year 1000, and with heavy concentration on archaeology. And in a nutshell, what we do is we deposit these things in NYU's Faculty Digital Archive. So if you don't mind clicking on that, Maureen, that's in the 4th paragraph down there. Oh, no, if you go back for a sec. iPods, you did open those up exactly as I said, but if you just click on the one that says NYU's faculty, you're right close to it. So you'll see that these are preserved in what is our institutional repository, which means that they will have permanent handles, and that's where we have all the metadata reside. But we serve it, and if you just go back to the next page, thank you. We've been serving it through Omeka. It's okay, it doesn't much matter. So we've been serving it through, it's very hard to do this without driving. It's okay. So you can just stick on this one. If you go to browse items, perfect. So essentially what we do is we pull the things from our FDA where they're preserved, and they appear here. And you could also, since we have them preserved in our FDA, which is indexed by Google, a lot of these items, and we've worked out collections for other areas of the world like Central Asia, these things appear very high up in Google searches. We're going to have a couple hundred of these things in there pretty soon. So essentially what we're doing is we're collecting, clearing the rights, preserving them in our in our institutional repository, where they can be reached directly from Google because that repository is indexed. But also we're making this site where things can be collected, and there'll be more keywords and sort of by different institutions, and there'll be more metadata of a certain sort. And finally, if you don't mind going back to the About page, and if you go down to two things that are sort of important, if you go to the Rights Information tab, you can see we have our takedown notice. We also have it in Russian. I hope to have it in Georgian and Armenian so that everyone knows, and we are doing our best to reach out to authors whenever we can. We are open to having people submit stuff. If you go to submit content to this collection, thank you. And if you go to the web form, there's a little Google form right there, fill out the web form. So if you know of anyone who has rights, we don't have to work only through these institutions, but if you know of anything that you think might be in scope and that you're the rights holder or know the rights holder, or there's a publisher and you want to help us clear the rights and even just give us enough information, we are happy to do that. And we have a due diligence process and we can do that. And then we're happy to serve it. So it's not gray literature, floating around in someone's thumb drive, or, just not held or anything like that. So we do try to upload this metadata whenever we can to WorldCat so that it is also found there and people can find these digital copies easily. Finally, I should say the handles are permanent so that you can cite this work as a permanent URL. And I think that's about it. There was only one other element. Do you mind going back then the reason there are two sites, and do you mind going to the one that's white? That one, perfect. So the one that I've been showing you, the red one, these are just sort of prototypes. We're still working to scan, digitize, and clear rights, and we're hoping to launch in 2021. We've been obviously slowed down a bit by COVID and other things. But one of the first site you saw was in Omeka, which is an open access, free content management system, and we're hoping to move everything to Omeka S. This white site that Marine is now on is Omeka S, which is the next generation of Omeka. They both have technical issues associated with our workflow in terms of how we pull stuff and batch upload stuff to our institutional repository and to this site. But we do hope to get this, and we'll have the visual branding. This is just a stub of a site in Omeka S. But anyway, so there we are. That's what it will be, and hopefully this will be an important and useful resource if you're interested in the ancient South Caucasus, and we're hoping to make it discoverable and easily citable. Thank you very much for allowing me these few minutes.
So thank you so much, David. That's going to be a great resource for people. So I'm now going to stop recording.